Hey everyone, welcome back to Survive the Shows. Today we have one of the most fascinating under-the-radar partnerships in history, so buckle up because this story spans Viennese salons, Hollywood glamour, avant-garde concert halls, secret wartime laboratories, and eventually the wireless revolution that powers your phone and laptop today. I'm talking about Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil, an actress whose beauty mesmerized millions, and a composer whose mechanical genius left audiences breathless. Together, in the middle of World War II, they sketched out an idea on cocktail napkins that would quietly reinvent communications forever. Let's start with Hedy. You know her face, those deep, enigmatic eyes, the way she seemed to float across the screen in films like Algiers and Samson and Delilah. But behind that cinematic glow was a relentless engineer at heart. Born Hedwig Kiesler in Vienna in 1914, she grew up surrounded by cutting-edge science. Her mother was a concert pianist with an analytical mind, her father was an inventor and an industrialist. As a child, she spent hours dismantling her mother's phonograph and experimenting with her father's prototypes. She took piano lessons, but she was equally drawn to mechanical devices. While her peers were learning etiquette, she was secretly sketching bridge designs and studying radio schematics. Her family circles included some of Europe's brightest thinkers, and by her late teens, young Hedy was known not only for her rakish wit and striking looks, but for hobbyist inventions she talked about at dinner tables. She once proposed improvements to public transport safety, ideas that struck her Viennese friends as both practical and delightfully unexpected coming from an 18-year-old duchess by marriage. She'd married a munitions manufacturer at 18, but fled an abusive relationship and fled to Paris, then eventually to Hollywood. By the time she landed in Los Angeles in the late 1930s, she was determined not to be typecast as merely a pretty face. Studio executives saw star power, Hedy saw opportunities to learn. While shooting Algiers in 1938, she would sneak off set to chat with the film crew's sound engineers, took notes on camera mechanics, and even volunteered to test new microphones. She kept a journal of technological curiosities alongside her script notes. It was during those days that she first grasped how radio waves could carry information, and how vulnerable those signals could be to interference. Now let's talk about George Antheil. First impressions, he was wild. A tall, intense man with a shock of dark hair, dressed in sleek modern suits or sometimes in bohemian canvas. A composer born in 1900 in New Jersey, he moved to Paris in his 20s and quickly made waves with Ballet Mécanique, a 1924 piece featuring synchronized player pianos, xylophones, drum kits, airplane propellers, and electric bells. Audiences either adored its relentless propulsion or fled in bewilderment. Critics called it noise, madness, even unmusical. But George reveled in its mechanical heartbeats. He saw beauty in machines, precision, repetition, the way they could generate patterns no human could play by hand. For him, technology and art were inseparable. By the late 1930s, Antheil had returned to New York, continuing to experiment with electronic instruments, automatons, and the early oscillators that would later appear in synthesizers. He collaborated with avant-garde artists, immersed himself in futurist manifestos, and sometimes lectured on the convergence of music and machinery. But with the outbreak of World War II, he, like many artists, felt a pull toward contributing to the war effort. And now the stage, it's 1940, and Hedy is devastated by news of U-boats sinking civilian and military vessels in the Atlantic. Each torpedo guided by radio signals that the Germans could jam at will, turning cutting-edge weapons into useless lumps of steel. She read reports of Allied ships torpedoed because their remote controls succumbed to enemy interference, and she saw parallels to the problems she discussed on sound stages: radio waves, interference, vulnerability. She wanted a solution. Somehow, she knew to seek out George Antheil. Both orbited the same circles of creative intellectuals in Hollywood, artists, inventors, and musicians. Hedy slipped into a dinner party hosted by mutual friends one evening. The living room crackled with conversation about Einstein's theories and the latest radar experiments. Hedy leaned toward Antheil across a tray of hors d'oeuvres and said, "They're jamming our torpedo signals. There must be a way to stop that." George's eyes lit up. He leaned in, asking, "What if we didn't broadcast on a single frequency, but hopped from one to the next in perfect sync?" That simple seed blossomed over the course of the evening. They moved to a side table and began drawing on cocktail napkins, a grid of numbers representing radio channels, arrows marking transitions, perforations like those on Antheil's player-piano rolls. Hedy sketched the transmitter, George mapped the piano roll mechanism that would automate the frequency shifts. They argued details: how fast should it hop? How many channels could it use? What would happen if the mechanism skipped a beat? By the time dessert arrived, they had the skeleton of frequency-hopping spread spectrum, a system where transmitter and receiver, using a shared key, would jump between dozens of frequencies so rapidly that any jammer would be hopelessly outpaced. Within months, they co-filed a patent, U.S. Patent 2,292,387 for a secret communication system. It described using a perforated paper tape, just like a player piano's roll, to synchronize frequency changes at both ends of a communication link. That way, only parties with the same tape could decode the signal, everyone else would hear static. By embedding synchronization instructions in the tape's timing, it was virtually impossible to jam or intercept. Hedy and George sent their invention to the U.S. Navy in 1942. They were at the height of their respective fame, she as a top-paid actress, he as an experimental composer. They expected excitement. Instead, the Navy politely thanked them and shelved the idea. The hardware didn't exist for miniaturized electronic hopping at that time, and bureaucratic inertia kept the concept in limbo. Hedy returned to Hollywood roles, White Cargo, Cover Girl, while Antheil returned to composing and writing about mechanized jazz. Both assumed their invention would vanish like so many good ideas lost in wartime urgency. Decades went by. After the war, transistor technology, integrated circuits, and spread spectrum theory matured. In the 1960s, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, military engineers dug up Hedy and George's patent, realizing its potential for secure communications. Suddenly, frequency hopping became a cornerstone of jam-resistant radios. Soon thereafter, in the 1980s and 90s, regulators opened up unlicensed portions of the radio spectrum. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cordless telephones, even garage door openers, every unlicensed system harnessed spread spectrum techniques directly descended from that 1942 patent. Hedy Lamarr, who by then had retired from acting, lived to see her legacy honored. In 1997, she received the Electronic Frontier Foundation's Pioneer Award. In 2014, she was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. George Antheil passed away in 1959, but his role was rediscovered by tech historians and celebrated in exhibit halls and documentaries. Neither ever married each other, they remained friends and collaborators, bound by mutual respect rather than romance. Their letters reflect playful camaraderie, he teasing her about her Hollywood blather, she joking about his piano pipe oboes. When she received her Walk of Fame star, she publicly thanked him for his ingenious musical mind. Their story matters on so many levels. It demolishes the myth of the lone genius toiling in isolation. It shows how breakthroughs often spring from unexpected collisions, between art and technology, glamour and grinding research, a curious actress and an experimental composer. It reminds us that bold ideas sometimes lie dormant until the world catches up. And it teaches us to value diverse voices, because innovation doesn't wear a single face or walk a single path. So next time you type a password on your laptop, tap connect on your phone, or stream a movie over your home network, remember Hedy Lamarr and George Antheil. Remember the hush of that Hollywood dinner, the clatter of 88-note piano rolls, and the lightning bolt idea sketched on a napkin. Their partnership rewrote the rules of communication and quietly ushered in the wireless age. If you loved uncovering this hidden chapter of history, go ahead and hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to Survive the Shows and ring the bell so you never miss another deep dive into history's most unexpected partnerships. Drop me a comment and let me know, which moment in Hedy and George's story amazed you most? Was it her mechanical curiosity on set, his synchronized piano roll genius, or the Navy's decades-long oversight? I can't wait to read your thoughts. Thanks for watching, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with the simplest ideas scribbled on a napkin. Until next time, keep surviving and thriving through the shows of history.